All right, so this is the first episode of a show I'm calling the Jet Set. I just came up with that last night at 5 in the morning. I don't know if it's any good, but my first guest had to be Mike Molyneaux, my main man, Mike Molyneaux, because we're doing a show that's going to just rip apart the Celtics end of the season. And we are completely like-minded in our frustration with the end of the Celtics season. So, Mike, you are not only the first guest, but you were my first thought for a guest. How does that feel?
That's awesome. I feel honored, man. I feel honored really to be
You
here
should.
as the first guest. I know, like you said, we're like-minded with a lot of our sports thoughts, so it's perfect.
Yeah, and what about the name? Again, this was like a 5 in the morning fever dream. Does the Jet Set work, or is it just
Hey,
completely
I
stupid?
like it. I like it. Something that rhymes, just bang, bang. Something easy to say, remember. It's perfect. It works out good.
Now, and then I have like the lightsabers up top.
Yep.
The problem is, like, I wanted to create like a cool logo. I'm not that good at Photoshop, so like this is just like sort of a starter because I'm gonna also be talking about Star Wars and Marvel stuff, which I know you love all the Marvel shit too.
Absolutely.
But like the problem is when you try to like say that you're like going to do a show about sports, you can't use the league logos because that's a copyright infringement.
Yep.
So like you're left with just like a bunch of balls, which is what I have. Like I'm never going to talk about volleyball, but there it is.
Hey, it's a
front
start.
center.
At least people know once they see the images, they know what to expect.
Yeah, that's fair. You know what? You're being overly kind, and I appreciate it.
I'm not gonna sit here and say this sucks. This setup's terrible. Well, come on now, Jet.
You could do that if you wanted to.
It's not in my DNA, man. I'm a nice guy.
You're true, Mr. Mike Nice. In fact,
that's right.
Right in the name. So, Mike, you know what does suck is that the Celtics aren't playing tonight, which is the first night of the NBA Finals. Instead, it's the Lakers and the Heat. It also it like makes me feel nauseous to say those two teams' names, as I hate both of them. But here we are with them squaring off in the NBA Finals, and it seemed like this was a golden opportunity for the Celtics with the bubble, with the Bucks being knocked off, no Ben Simmons in the first round, to be playing here, and they're not. So what went wrong in your opinion?
What went wrong? The lights were a little too bright in a sense, especially if I can key in on one person for sure who was a big part of this team. Huge acquisition at the start of offseason, Kemba Walker, right?
I thought you were going to say Vincent Poirier.
I'll get to him later on for sure. Don't worry. I'll get to Vincent. But, I mean, Kemba, the guy you brought in I don't mean to bring his name up, and it's the only time I'm going to bring his name up, the Kyrie replacement, right, comes to the team, and he has an amazing regular season. When he's healthy, he's on the floor. He plays awesome. He gets another all-star nod. Looks great. But then you get to the playoffs, you get through a Philly team who's not all – what we thought they would be in the playoffs, especially missing Ben Simmons. But the lights just kept getting brighter and brighter, and the competition just kept getting tougher and tougher, and the media just keys in on you more and more as you get deeper into the playoffs. And Kemba's not used to that, Jet. They're not sniffing anything like that down there in Charlotte. He's used to playing free basketball, lollygagging, doing his thing. Michael Jordan sitting next to the bench, having a good time. It's not like that here in Boston. And as they got deeper into the playoffs, the lights, in my opinion, just got too bright for Kemba Walker. He's still a great player. The talent's there, absolutely. But for him specifically, the lights got too bright for him this season. And then overall.
What were you hoping you'd get out of him? Superstar Kemba? Cardiac Kemba?
All-star Kemba. This is eighth, ninth year in the league now. I think everybody was expecting to see consistently cardiac Kemba, like you were just about to say. And, there was no cardiac Kemba to be spotted in a lot of those games in the postseason, especially going through that Toronto Raptors series and then the Miami Heat series. I mean, eventually I think he figured it out or caught fire a little bit somewhere along the way. But overall, this will not be a memorable performance for Kemba Walker in the 1920 playoffs. It just wasn't good for him. He didn't live up to the expectations.
Yeah, he certainly didn't step up. I mean, I can't disagree with you there. I think that there's a lot of problems. I've been harping on Brad Stevens for years now. It's my favorite dog whistle on Twitter is to start shitting on the coach. I think he got outcoached in 2 straight series.
Yeah.
Hard to put a loss squarely on the shoulders of just the coach in basketball. You can do that in football sometimes, but I mean the players deserve a lot of blame. Certainly, you didn't get the performance out of Kemba that you were hoping for, like you said. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I think you got to point your finger at other players too, and not only at Brad Stevens, but at Danny Ainge and I know this is something you've talked about a lot on Twitter. The bench just wasn't deep enough to help you out in the playoff series, and you're counting on Grant Williams to play big minutes. You're counting on guys like Semi Ojeleye, who, I love the guy's work ethic and stuff, but let's face it, he's a fringe NBA player. And meanwhile, the Heat are pulling guys off their bench like Tyler Hero. Granted, he is a rookie who's performing. Andre Iguodala killed the Celtics in Game 7. And they were just a much deeper team, and they counted on veterans. And the Celtics were counting on guys who, despite Kemba Walker being a veteran, had never been there before.
Yeah, I think the overall story of the Celtics team in the 1920 season is just the fact that they never truly had depth. Coming out of the offseason, looking at the moves and different things Danny Ainge did, I knew this team depth-wise wouldn't be, in my opinion, go far. Now, yes, the talent is there. If you look at the top 4 or 5 players, Tatum, Brown, Kemba Walker, Hayward, Smart, I guess you can throw him in there a little bit. The core talent it's truly awesome, especially led by these 2 young guys in Tatum and Brown, who are 22 and 23 years old. But after that, the depth and the team Danny Ainge put together, in my opinion, I never really saw this team contending for a title, because the names you just mentioned, Grant Williams, nah, he ain't it on the championship team. Semi Ojeleye,
that's not your guy.
Semi Ojeleye should have probably been gone last season. You go overseas, and I guess Danny Ainge and his scout team trying to find the next hidden gem in Vincent Poirier. That doesn't pan out. On top of the fact that you draft about 4 or 5 guys who have zero impact on the team. Your top overall draft pick in Langford, who they took at 14, he can't even stay on the court for 2 minutes.
Keeps getting the same injury. Keeps getting the wrist injury.
Injury prone throughout the whole year. So if you just and Brad Wanamaker and Javonte Green, 2 guys who are damn near 30 years old and are just in their rookie seasons in the NBA, and there's a reason for that they're 30 years old and they're just playing in the NBA for the first time. So the depth that Danny Ainge put together, the team that he put together, I've always felt since last October that this team wasn't it. And that just goes into me questioning more Danny Ainge's moves. And are you trying to build a championship team, Danny Ainge, or are you trying to draft 4 or 5 guys and hope that the depth develops and you get something? Because like I said, you have a core group of guys who clearly have the talent. All the talk of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown going to the conference finals every year so far of their young careers, that's great and all. And clearly they can get you there. But what are you putting around them to really get them over the hump?
Well, let's talk about those guys for a second, because, I mean, that's the cornerstones of your franchise, right? Brown and Tatum. Were you disappointed at all in either of them in this series against Miami?
Jason Tatum for sure. I mean, the stats will say one thing, but
he just goes through lulls, right, where he doesn't do anything.
Those 2-3 games where he starts 0 of 6, 0 of 7 from the field, that's not a superstar. Like, don't get me wrong. I definitely feel Tatum and Brown will be superstars in this league, but they're not there yet. They're not there yet. And a lot of people are dubbing them, oh, they're the guys, they're the superstars. They're not there yet. And that's clearly obvious when Jason Tatum in a pivotal game 6, in a pivotal game 5, when your team is down, you're starting off over 5 and 0 and 6. You got to immediately put an impact on the game from the jump. Jaylen Brown, in all honesty, I don't have much complaints about him throughout the playoffs.
I thought he outplayed Tatum a lot. You know, it's the stats, like you said, might tell something different in terms of scoring averages, but in the games that they won in Miami, against Miami rather, he set the tone. Jaylen set the tone, not Tatum. I mean, driving to the basket early in that game 3 win, I mean, that was all Brown early on, and he consistently defends more. Listen, his ceiling's not as high as Tatum's, just he's not as long. He's not as good of a jump shooter. But I feel like he does have some of that, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to go to the basket, I'm going to score attitude. Whereas Tatum still kind of like plays lax. And what drives me crazy about Tatum is he knows how good he is. And that sometimes can be a problem because he plays loose with the ball. Like, how many shitty turnovers did we see from Jason Tatum? Just being careless with his dribble, throwing a dumb, like, cross-court pass. Like, turnovers killed the Celtics in this series against Miami. I mean, make no doubt about it. They shot themselves in the foot. That's what's the most frustrating thing to me is that, listen, credit to Miami. They're an excellent team. They play well. They're built really well. But this was a winnable series for the Celtics. And in a lot of these games, I feel like the Celtics lost, not Miami won. The Celtics they either panicked, turned the ball over too much. The rotations were crap. There's a lot of things you can point to and say, hey, the Celtics could have won this series if they had just made a little bit of adjustment here or were a little bit more careful with the basketball. I mean, the game that they lost, I think it was game 5. Was it 18 turnovers in that game, or was it game? For one of those games, 18 turnovers is absurd. I mean, that's absurd. That should never happen. If you're a team that's in the Eastern Conference Finals, you should be good enough to not turn the ball over 18 times.
Yeah, it's if you look in, even I could go back as far as the Toronto series. Talent-wise, the Celtics are way better than the Toronto Raptors.
It's not even close.
The Celtics are more talented than the Miami Heat. The talent is there. Each series, if you look at the top 5 players from both teams, your 3 out of the 5 players are going to be Celtics players between Tatum, Brown, and Kemba.
You're right. If you do that, just straight up roster for roster draft, you go, okay,
exactly.
Tatum probably won. In the Raptors series, Tatum won. Maybe Brown too. I mean, Siakam showed me nothing in that series. Absolutely nothing.
I'm done with Siakam. But yeah, talent-wise, the Celtics are there. But a lot of the things you just listed yourselves, bad rotations, bad coaching, Brad getting out-coached, lack of depth. It's crazy to me if you look at just the Miami series. And again, we could talk about how the Celtics are more talented. But when it goes to guys to bring in off the bench, Iguodala, who is way past his prime, at the tail end of his career. But just the fact that they knew they can look to Iguodala in a pivotal game like Game 6, and he knew to come on the court and provide what he can provide because he's a veteran in this league. He's been there before. He knows what time it is, and will.
And Mike, where'd they get him? They got him at the trade deadline, and Jay Crowder. What did the Celtics do at the trade line? Absolutely nothing. Sat on their hands. And I know you were one of the loudest people on Twitter saying, what are you doing? Get a big. Get something. The Celtics, you knew you had holes in the bench. And that's on Danny Ainge. Listen, I'd love to blame Brad Stevens for everything. I would. But that's on Ainge. I mean, you did not give your team enough of a bench to be able to rely on when games went into the postseason. You were pulling guys and then Brad Stevens' rotations were all over the place. I mean, he was throwing in Langford when he was healthy for something. He was trying anything, and that's because there's just not enough good pieces on the bench. Listen, ultimately, it should come down to who your starters are, right? It's the playoffs. Your best players should, but you can't have nobody on your bench. I mean, and when Hayward went down, you had nobody on your bench.
Even worse.
Because listen, I like Cantor, and I think he's a valuable player, but he's a one-way player. He can't play defense. Everybody knows that. Tice, you saw against Bam Adebayo, he didn't stand a chance against Bam Adebayo. He just got absolutely bodied. He got bodied against Joel Embiid too. If Joel Embiid had a little bit more fight in him, maybe that series would have been interesting. Because Tice is a good player, but he's undersized for his position. He can't defend guys like Adebayo or Embiid. He just can't do it. You're asking him to do something that's impossible for him to do. And so you don't have a guy who can really body up those bigs. And you saw Adebayo just completely dominated the Celtics.
Oh, he had
in every way. He was the best. He was the best player on the court in the Eastern Conference Finals. He was.
Yes.
I mean, and in a series with Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, Adebayo, and I don't think there was even a discussion. He was the best player on the court, and there wasn't a close second.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with you. I think Bam Adebayo was easily the best player throughout the Eastern Conference Finals. But, all in all, with everything we're saying, we're talking as if the Celtics had a chance to win this series and get to the finals.
I think they had a chance to win the championship this year, Mike. I legitimately think they could have beaten the Lakers. They match up fine with the Lakers outside of Anthony Davis, who would have probably averaged 50.
Yeah.
But
as bad as we talk about the depth and all, but the major piece that lacked from this team this year, especially, the depth obviously outcoached. But even when you ran with your top guys, your core guys, just the lack of heart, the lack of passion,
that's what kills me. That's what kills me, Mike.
The lack of heart and toughness is really what shot this team in the foot, because you get in these situations against Miami where you're up by 14 points or 13 points or 6 points late in the fourth quarter. You're up, and the way Miami is built, they're not going away. I knew that from the beginning, that Miami, you would never really truly see blowouts in this series, because Miami is just a team that is going to continue to battle the way they're built.
It's not just that. It's just not that they're going to battle because that's the way they're built too. But when you have those kind of 3-point shooters, those leads don't really mean anything.
You're never out of a game. You're never out of a game if you're the Miami Heat. But those tough situations when it got late in the fourth quarter and the lead started dwindling down, then you really start to see, okay, this team has no real heart and toughness and grit to hold on and fight and battle. And even if you got your top guy struggling, Brad Stevens can't even look to the side and say, all right, somebody got to come off this bench and give me some life, give me some grit, toughness. There's nobody he can turn to. So when you're not getting it from your top guys, and you can't even look down to your bench and you're not getting it from Brad Wanamaker and Robert Williams and Ojale and then the rookies and Grant, like you're not getting it from them. That's what really a lot of these games boil down to. You got beat because you're just not tough enough.
I think as a fan, Mike, that's the most frustrating thing, is that when you say, hey, we're better than this team, we're losing because of effort. I mean, that sucks. And I 100% agree with you. You as a fan, it's just maddening to see, and this happened in multiple games, your team just flat out quit, not get 50-50 balls. Who would have thought a team with Marcus Smart would quit? And they did. In a lot of games, they just absolutely quit. They didn't show any mental toughness. And that is the worst. Listen, I can tip my hat and say, hey, you lost to a better team. Like, it happens sometimes. Like Milwaukee last year, they were just better than the Celtics. And the Celtics had a lot of problems. Like, you're like, I get it. Listen, this was not going anywhere. But this team was more talented than the Heat. And they had leads in the fourth quarter constantly that they pissed away. That's effort. That's panicking. Game 6 was a perfect example of it. Had a lead, grant 6 points. That's not much, but still a lead in the fourth quarter. Miami came back. They went up by like 4. The Celtics fucking lost it and started just panicking and hucking away 3 after 3. It's like, what do you do? That's terrible in terms of just like composure. And that's also, I'm sorry, that's on the coach too. You got to be like, Brad Stevens' timeout usage, it drives me crazy.
Very questionable.
He thinks his team will figure out how to play itself out of these runs. They never do. So why it's like he thinks he can take them with him. Like it'll give him a bonus at the end of the season on his contract if if you don't use all your timeouts or something like that. It carries over like sick days or something like that. It's not how it works, Brad. You got to use these timeouts to stop runs. Spoelstra did a great job of it. Listen, I gained a lot of respect for Eric Spoelstra. I thought he sort of rode LeBron's coattails through a lot of that Big 3 run in Miami. Nah, he's a good coach. He coached the pants off Brad Stevens.
He
punked him.
I've never seen a team go to zone and consistently use it. Let alone
let's talk about the zone, Mike. Please, God, let's talk about the zone.
Like teams during the midst of a game, depending on how the game's going, they'll turn to zone for a little bit and then probably shift back to man. But not only did Miami use zone in one game, for every game in the series, they turned to zone, and those guys, coached by Spoelstra, played it to the T. If you
Raptors did the same thing too. Raptors almost beat you with a very, very limited roster compared to you by playing a zone.
Like teams found a way. The Miami Heat found a way to slow the Celtics down and is playing a solid zone defense. And like I said, teams don't usually rely on zone that much, but Miami Heat, Eric Spoelstra had those guys stick to it, and they played it beautifully. Beautiful play. Zone
it's like you're an NBA team. You've been playing against zone since you were in high school, man. Middle school. Yeah. I coached elementary and middle school basketball. We played zone all the time and against the zone. It's not that complicated. And the Celtics looked like they had acid thrown in their face every time they faced the zone. They couldn't two things they couldn't do that have been in basketball since Peach Basket days. Zone defense, they couldn't figure out how to beat it, and pick and roll. They couldn't figure out how to defend a pick and roll. And for their life, they could not figure out how to defend a pick and roll. And that's the sort of stuff you're like, these guys are pros, man. I mean, come on, figure this stuff out. Man. Listen, if in one game, if that sort of stuff beats you, you go, okay. And then the next game, you adjust to it. But to lose game after game because the team's playing a zone defense against you, this isn't new stuff.
Yeah, and then Brad Stevens will go into, post-game interviews and will tell the media, it's not about the zone.
That drove me crazy. That
Miami Heat's just a better team. No! It's about the zone because you can't figure it out, Brad. You can't figure it out. Or if you can figure it out, you're not reiterating it to your team. Like simple basketball coaching.
Yeah, either way, it's not good, right? They're either not listening to him outright, they're ignoring him, or Brad can't figure out how to make an adjustment to his own. Whatever the answer is, it's not good.
It's whatever wasn't good at all. And I mean, it sucks that that's a conversation we have to have because, like we said, that's simple. Simple zone. You're up against a zone defense. Swing the ball and cut. Players should never be stagnant or just standing in the corner. Something that I hated, and not only just the Miami Heat series, but even against the Raptors and whatnot. I hate the fact that late in games in the fourth quarter, it seems the ball must go to Tatum, maybe Kemba Walker, and that's it. And you have Jaylen Brown, who maybe went through the first three quarters, dropping damn near 30 points, is just now relegated to a spot-up shooter in the corner. You have scorers, Brad.
Their offense, it sucks. I mean, it really based off of not the skill, but because of how they run it. It's like, okay, Tatum, dribble at the top of the key for 23 seconds.
Step back three.
That's their go-to play. When they're like, okay, need a basket, Tatum, just dribble the ball until it has no air left in it. Or Kemba, you do the same thing. It makes no sense. You have when Hayward's on the court, you have four scorers in Kemba, Tatum, Brown, Hayward.
Yep.
Sometimes Smart is a scorer when he decides he's hitting threes. And that should create matchup problems. But for some reason, it doesn't. Mike, we have our first question. I want you to take this one because it's about Kemba Walker, who you criticized first. Also, Greg Castillo wants to know, any concern for Kemba's future health and being a defensive liability in the playoffs?
The Kemba Walker knee injury literally came out of nowhere. Like, this is a guy who's played pretty much every game throughout his career in Charlotte.
Very healthy in Charlotte.
Very healthy in Charlotte. And then he gets to Boston, gets to the playoffs, and bam, here comes this knee injury that pretty much slows him down. He has to play limited minutes to start in the bubble. But he's a defensive liability. And it's very bad. Like, I thought Isaiah Thomas was bad and clearly a defensive liability. But Kemba Walker is bad. We're talking about getting eat up by Dragic, getting eat up by Lowry. It's tough. And obviously, the way the Celtics are set up, they can kind of mask that by putting Smart on somebody, and you have that youth and length from Tatum and Brown. But it's something that the Celtics are going to have to accept, hoping that on the other end of the court, you're going to get the guy who can average 20 points a game.
So let me ask you this then. Is Kemba Walker somebody that you would move from this team? If you can get something nice in return, do you move from Kemba Walker knowing that he didn't show up too much in the playoffs? He was inconsistent, and you have the defensive liability aspect of it. Are you sold on Kemba Walker being part of the future of this team?
Yes, Kemba Walker is a part of the core of this team. When you talk about the core, Tatum, Brown, Kemba, Smart, and I'm still putting Hayward in that mix, even though people are done with Hayward. But that's the core. And I think chemistry-wise, what we saw throughout the regular season with this team, a lot of that was because of Kemba. And, obviously things look much different in terms of his play when they got to the playoffs. But I honestly just think this is a guy who has never been, I don't care what NCAA shot he hit for Connecticut Huskies. I don't care. This is the NBA. This is the playoffs. He's never experienced it before. He didn't know what to expect, in my opinion. And the lights, like I said, were too bright for him. Something that at his age and with his time in the league, I believe he'll be better. It was a rough season for sure, rough playoffs for him for sure, but I believe he'll bounce back. And, he's a huge part of the core of this team moving forward over the next several seasons.
Well, let's sort of get into the offseason now and the core of the team. So are you happy if they say, we'll just make some minor tweaks to the bench, maybe add a veteran and still roll with the core of Kemba, Hayward, Brown, Tatum, Smart?
I firmly believe you keep those 5 guys right there. I'm completely fine with those 5.
You don't want to look to move any of them in the offseason.
I don't think any of them, those guys should be moved. Hayward, maybe, because obviously he's not worth that $30+ million he's going to get next season. He's not.
Nothing you can do about that.
And
right?
I mean, obviously I heard rumors and rumbling about maybe they can restructure his contract to something team friendly and give him a couple more years. If you can make that happen for him, sure. But if you have to eat that $30 million, it's not going to be enjoyable. But at the same time, if you can move Hayward for two pieces and make a move that way, I'm all for that. But if it had to boil down to it, keep those 5 together. I think that's the core that you need to roll with. Danny Ainge needs to do a better job putting pieces around that core. And I think you can be right back into a championship situation. Like, are you building a championship team, Danny Ainge, or do you want to just draft? Because they have another 3 or 4 or 5 draft picks in the
too many. They don't need any of them.
Any of them if you want to build a championship team. Screw the draft, Danny Ainge.
No, they have too much youth on the team as it is. They really do. There's a lot of the rumors about, and obviously they're just rumors at this point because people overreact to what the season ending and want to immediately start trading everybody. And I'm in favor of making some moves. I don't necessarily think the team is fatally flawed, but there's something wrong with the sort of the internal makeup of the team. I don't think the players themselves, I think they're all great. But I think, and I talked to you about this a little bit on Twitter, I think when you're putting all the pieces together as a puzzle, I'm not sure if it fits. I like the switchability of having a lot of those wings, but clearly having no big doesn't work. Maybe Rob Williams develops into that. I thought Brad Stevens' playing time of Rob Williams was borderline criminal. Like, if I was a lawyer, I would bring him to court over it. I thought it was that bad that he didn't play him enough. I'm a big Rob Williams guy, so I might be just biased. But there's a lot of rumors going around about my main guy, Marcus Smart. Christian Fourier on WEI starting a war against Marcus Smart, saying he needs to go. He's the problem. Mike?
That's foolish. For anyone to say that Marcus Smart is the problem, that's foolish. Marcus Smart, what was it, game 3 against the Heat where they had, or game 2 where there was that locker room scuffle?
Yeah.
Marcus Smart was the one who started that. And in all honesty, because of this team and how they're made up and the coach that they have, as fans, we weren't used to hearing a locker room scuffle possibly happening, when that probably happens in other locker rooms all the time. But here's Marcus Smart, a guy who lit a fire under the whole team because a fire needed to be lit the way they were playing. And
God knows Brad Stevens won't do it.
Exactly. And I'm going to get to that too. Brad Stevens not lighting that fire, and there's nobody else on the roster who's lighting that fire. Maybe Jaylen Brown, but he's a little quiet and reserved still too. He's still only 23 years old. But Marcus Smart is the only guy that can really light a fire under this team.
Is it a problem when, listen, everybody knows what Marcus Smart brings to the team in terms of heart and intensity and stuff, but is it a problem when the guy who's maybe your 3rd or 4th or 5th best player has to play that role of lighting the fire or motivating the team? Does it need to be one of your star players that does that?
I mean, yeah, you'd rather it be your stars, your leaders, your main guys to light that fire on the team. But if we're talking about this current situation and what the Celtics have in front of them, your stars are only in their 3rd and 4th years in the league. So obviously right now, they're not in that necessarily mindset yet. They don't have it yet, in my opinion, which is why Danny Ainge, as the general manager, needs to see that and say, well, we still have great young talent, but leadership-wise, mentally, they're not there yet to really push the team. Let me go into the offseason and let me see what veterans out there who are maybe still hungry, who have that leadership capabilities to bring onto this team to help push the guys. They don't have to get 30 minutes a game, 25 minutes a game, but you bring them to the team and just have those guys as a voice. If you're not getting it from your head coach and Stevens, somebody else has to light a fire under their asses when they're in the bench or on the bus, in the locker rooms, hotel rooms. Brad's not going to be there all the time. When the players are together, other than Smart, who else can do that? I love the fact that Marcus Morris was on this team the last 2 seasons. I loved it, and I was sad to see him go. Obviously, he was going to demand a lot of money.
He was that type of guy, like you said.
I loved him on this team. Celtics need more of that, because as great as Tatum and Brown are as your leaders, even Kemba Walker, he's Mr. Nice Guy too. As great as they are, you're not going to get that fire out of them. You need players, whether they can average 20 points a game or whether they're just on the end of the bench, just having a voice and opinion. You need players like that on a team. Look at the 2 teams in the finals right now. Iguodala, who knows if he'll play 10 minutes in a game this series, but you know what he'll bring to the bench.
You have a bunch of those guys, Crowder, Butler, obviously.
And the Lakers are made up of guys like that.
Yeah.
Jared Dudley, who's not going to play a minute.
No, locker room guys. No, he won't.
Locker room guys.
Something will have gone very wrong if Jared Dudley's playing in the final.
0 locker room guys off the bench. 0. You don't hear a peep from the bench in the bubble, when it's Taco Fall and Langford and Grant Williams. What are they talking about? They don't know anything. They just got here. They just
teaching Taco Fall to swim. That's what they're doing.
Like Danny Ainge, man.
I agree with you. I think the thing is, like, the Celtics team, I think they all liked each other. Like, the chemistry in terms of liking each other was better. Listen, they didn't like there was an issue with Kyrie last year, clearly. But just chemistry isn't enough to motivate guys, right? No. Just because, hey, I like this guy next to me, I love this guy next to me, doesn't mean I'm going to go run over somebody for this dude next to me, or I'm going to sacrifice my body for this guy next to me. I'm not going to let this guy next to me lose. There's no way in hell I'm going to let this guy next to me lose. Just liking somebody isn't good enough, and this team, and that was the excuse I heard at the trade deadline from Danny Ainge was, we don't want to mess with the chemistry of this team. This team all likes each other. They're all friends. That's great. Listen, I prefer a team that is all friends with each other than all hates each other. Yeah. But you need to have guys, like you said, who light that fire. And you also, at times, I'm not saying you have to do it all the time. You don't have to be obnoxious about it. You don't have to be Nick Nurse. But the coach needs to, at some point, get into it with a referee or get into it with a player. Brad Stevens is just so reserved in the sidelines. Listen, we all know NBA referees are terrible. So you have the opportunity about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a game to just scream your head off at a referee over a bad call, because it's guaranteed to happen that many times in the game. He never does it. And a lot of these, Nurse successfully lobbied the refs a lot of times in that series against Toronto. Spoelstra talks to the refs too. Brad Stevens never complains. There's always, sir, ma'am. And listen, that's great for kids watching to learn their manners. And I'm sure Brad Stevens' children are going to be the nicest, most polite people you'd ever like to meet. And Brad Stevens is I'm sure, and according to the Celtics media, the nicest guy ever. That's why none of them are willing to criticize him. But sometimes, especially in these big moments, you have to have your team's back, right? And I feel like if I was a player for that and I got a crap call against me, which Daniel Tice does on a regular basis, I would really love for my coach to go to bat for me. And I feel like there's got probably sometimes a sense in the Celtics locker room where, man, I really wish this guy would yell at the ref instead of me having to do it, or start having my back more instead of designing plays and shit like that. I just think that he needs to change his approach to his demeanor sometimes. He can't, this Mr. Nice Guy thing, it works to a point, and I think it's really good for some of these younger players to learn, like, how to be respectful and, like, help them grow as young men. And I think Brad Stevens is a tremendous developer of young talent, but I haven't seen any ability from Brad to be able to take a team from expectations to reaching that ceiling that you're hoping that they can reach. This season, as nice as it was with not having Kyrie on the team, you have to look at it as a disappointment based off of the path that was there for the Celtics in the bubble and where they ended up losing in 6 games to a Miami team that's roster, like you said, Mike, is not really as good as yours. And I think a lot of it, we've been talking about the players, but the coaching really has driven me crazy, in not just, his personality, but the substitutions, the timeouts. It really, really bothered me. And I'm not sure if we're talking about offseason moves, he's not going to get fired, but I'm not sure that Brad Stevens is the long-term solution for this team at coach if they want to win another championship, which if you're the Boston Celtics, that's the only goal. Not getting the Eastern Conference Finals, not making the playoffs. The goal is winning a championship. That's just like the Patriots. That's your only goal, is winning the Super Bowl. The Celtics history and fans and expectations has put it where you are in the championship round, you're winning a championship, or a season's a disappointment.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I firmly believe, just like, the core players on this team have to grow and come back better players, Brad Stevens has to come back a better coach. And you think over his coaching history and his coaching career, this is a guy that's used to taking the underdog teams and having them come together and play well and play as a team and get far that way. Those early teams, we're talking Chris Humphries and Gerald Wallace and those guys.
Yeah, garbage talent. Yeah.
Garbage talent. But remember those days, he got a lot of those teams.
He did. He squeezes the orange really well.
But now, over the last 2-3 seasons, now you're talking about teams that have superstar talent. They're not just pieces thrown together and hope to get the best out of all of them. Now you're talking about superstar talent. It all started that offseason once you got Hayward and Kyrie.
Yep.
That's when it all started. Now Brad Stevens, a guy who's used to coaching, I don't want to say it, but bums that play well. Now you're coaching talent.
Yeah, coaching underdogs. I mean, that's all he's coached was underdogs.
That's all he's had. Now he has talent that he's coaching. And fast forward to this season, they're still young, Tatum and Brown, but they're talent now. I think Brad has to grow and develop in terms of how he coaches talent, how he gets the best out of, that talent, but the team around him. He has to grow some more. He's still fairly young. This is only his 7th year as an NBA coach, when a lot of these other coaches
it's a lot of time for most NBA coaches to be with one team.
But you think about it, a lot of these coaches in the league, they've either coached for many years or they're former players in the league. So and Brad's neither. He's neither right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mike, because I think the Celtics really could use a former player on their coaching staff. I think that is really, really lacking, is not having that type of voice. I think, listen, Kara Lawson, I think, did a great job, and I think they missed her for not being in the bubble because she took over the Duke women's job, and she was a professional player. I mean, she played in the WNBA, and I think that's something. But
I hate the coaching staff. I really do.
Yeah, it's because I feel like it's a lot of yes men, right? And I feel like the same with the front office.
Took the words right out of my mouth. They're a bunch of Jay Larinaga, the Mr. Clap man. All right, guys. Yeah, good job. Like, they're all yes men who just, Brad, I see that, Brad. I think this is where Danny Ainge needs to open his damn eyes to what's going on. Everything you just mentioned about how Brad Stevens doesn't go to bat for his players and he's never going to argue with the refs and everything. Danny Ainge needs to see that and understand, okay, Brad's not that type of guy. He's a great coach, but he's not that type of guy to go to bat for his players and argue with refs and get texts. He's not that guy. But damn, if you can get an assistant coach, or damn, if you can get those type of players who will get your team riled up and want to argue and fight. I don't mean to say that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown need protection, but like, if you think of some stars early in their career, I would reach back to Michael Jordan as a young player in this league. Who's the tough guy that had his back early on? Charles Oakley.
Yeah.
Celtics need players like that who, Tatum and Brown kind of nice and reserved. They're still young. But if they get into a little tussle, somebody will step up off the bench and flex on the other team. Celtics don't have
Smart will, but he's like 6'5", so what do
he needs? It needs to be him and somebody else.
Yeah.
Celtic, that Danny.
Yeah, you need that enforcer. And listen, as far as the assistant coach and the coaching staff goes too, there's a ton of ex-NBA players who would love to get into the NBA. Looking for a job. Just give one a chance. Listen, they don't need to be an X's and O's genius.
No, but at least
I think just the experience of having been in the league and played and hope maybe you get a guy who's won a championship. I think that means a lot and brings a lot to the locker room. And the Celtics, for whatever reason, have been resistant to bring that on the coaching staff. I'm not sure why.
Danny, when I tell you, Jet, I have Danny Ainge on the hot seat.
Good point by Greg Castillo. Where Eddie House at?
It's a good, you know what? And I had this conversation recently. Danny Ainge back in 2008, when he had that Celtics team, what did he do that offseason once he got the big three together? He went out and got hungry players. Posey, House, Cassell, PJ Brown, hungry NBA vets who could still bring something to the table, but obviously we're hungry for a championship team. Clearly, there's no big three right now with the team that you have. But damn, bring some hungry guys who can support these young, talented players, who can sit them down and say, hey, young fella, I know what you're trying to do. I know what you're trying to accomplish. You're not having that conversation with Vincent Poirier and Semi Ojeleye. Oh, my gosh.
No, you're 100% right. I think that there's flaw with that. The hat goes on backwards. That's when you're upset.
I'm
saying it doesn't even have to be an ex-Celtic. Anybody, give an ex-player a chance. So many of them are dying to break into coaching. And, I think, too, you see guys who have no coaching experience get head coaching jobs like Steve Nash. Just giving him a shot, giving him a roll of the dice.
But at the end of the day, he's a former player who can connect with players. Who's a former player on the Celtics staff?
Players respect other players. They've been through the same shit. They know what he's talking about. Brad Stevens may be a great X's and O's guy. I'm not taking that away from him, but he played Division III basketball, man. That's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. He doesn't know what the pressure is like of being a Jordan brand sponsored athlete and doing commercials for Gatorade. He doesn't know what that's like. He can't possibly imagine it. I mean, you playing Division III basketball. Listen, that's better than you and me. Brad Stevens, I'm sure, would kick the crap out of us in one-on-one. But I'm not responsible for the direction of the Celtics. God knows I wish I was. But they need to make some changes to the character of this team. And that can start with the coaching staff, and that can start with guys you add on the team who are character guys. I'm not saying Ojeleye or Poirier or Taco are bad guys. They seem like great guys. But you need guys who are hungry, guys who will get in Tatum's face and say, hey, man, you had 0 points in the first half of this playoff game. What the hell's going on? Come on, man. You need guys like that, and they don't have them. So they need to do something this offseason. Change up the makeup of the team. There is a character flaw with this team that you saw in that Miami series, and a compete flaw with this team you saw in it.
This is it.
So that's it's hard. You're right.
They don't have it.
You're right. I'm open to a trade. I don't want to trade Marcus Smart because I feel like my heart would collapse. No. I love who he is. So I completely disagree with the war on Marcus Smart that Christian Fourier is starting. But I think that Hayward, if somebody wants to take on that contract, I'm okay with it. I think to give you something you don't have a good enough starting center. Tice is a situational. He's a great six man. He's a great guy off the bench to have as your backup center. You don't have a starting center. Rob Williams isn't there yet. Miles Turner's a name that I heard kicked around a lot. I like Miles Turner's fit. Listen, he's not been great. He wasn't great this last year. He didn't respond super well to Domantas Sabonis taking a little bit of his sign off. But I think the Celtics could use that. A big who blocks shots. He can shoot some threes. It gives them something they don't have. You have a lot of redundancy on this Celtics team.
A lot.
Brown, Tatum, Hayward to an extent. They all play the same position. They all have sort of want to do similar stuff. They all want the ball in their hands. You have too much redundancy there. At guys with different skill sets, I think backup point guard's an important spot to get to. Wanamaker's tough, but man, he's a third string point guard at best. And what bothers me is so much about the guys who cover the team every single day, the Celtics guys, they fall in love with these guys because they start to know them personally. And Wanamaker has a great story. working his ass off to get into the NBA. Brad Stevens is a really nice guy, but it's to the point where they won't criticize him, and that's just ridiculous. This team abjectly failed. They did. Losing to the Heat in 6 games is a failure, and if you treat it like, hey, everything's fine, this team's young, they're going to keep growing, that's a flaw that is going to bite them in the ass. No, I know veterans win in the championships in the NBA, but these guys are starting to get enough time under their belt where it's time that they start making the leap from expectations to reality. So that's what I'm expecting is if they don't do anything to address some of these problems we talk about in the offseason, I have a real problem with that. And it's going to start at the top with Danny Ainge.
Hot seat, Jet. He's there.
I think that's fair. Fans are getting tired. Fans are getting tired of waiting. Been over 10 years since they've been in the NBA Finals, Mike.
And you have you're no longer hoping for draft picks to fall, and you have your core. The core's there. Now you have to build a team. Like you got Tatum now, you got Brown now, Kemba's here. You have the core. Now you have to build a team, Danny Ainge. You have to build the team.
No, I'm done developing the young guys. I'm done with
more development time. It's time to build a championship team. The East is going to be tough next year.
It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder. But no way the Bucks are going to sit on this roster and say, we're going to roll the dice with Giannis leaving. They're going to get better. They're going to get better. The Nets are going to be better. Whether it's going to work or not, to the extent that they want it to, I don't know. You can't tell me a team that's adding Kevin Durant's going to be worse. So they're going to be better. The Sixers might hire Doc Rivers, which I think would be a great hire.
Toronto's not going anywhere.
Presumably they'd be better. Toronto's not going anywhere. The East is going to be better. They are. Indiana won't be as banged up next year.
That is true.
You got and you're going to have to go on the road and play games on the road. You're not going to have a neutral bubble site next year, hopefully.
Danny, hey, depending on what happens this offseason and what moves Danny Ainge makes, you'll hear from me if I'm on that fire Danny train. Yes. I swear. And if I got to toot it myself, I will. Because
all right, I'll join you. I think it's time to start taking a serious look at it. Our guy Gary Washburn from the Globe had an article the other day going at Danny Ainge. It's the first time I've seen a guy in black and white print say, hey, this guy needs to start doing a better job. So it's starting. I'd like to see a little bit more fans get on board. We'll see. Mike, you were the best first guest imaginable. Thank you so much. I hope that you are willing to come on frequently.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right.
This is great.
All right, man. Thank you so much. You can follow Mike on Twitter at Mr._Mike Nice. It is right there, that direction, on under his face right there. How you holding up with the quarantine before I let you go? Everything going okay? You're back at school?
Back at school.
Pandemic
learning.
Life.
Making the most out of this remote learning right now, but it's
right, man.
Moving slowly.
Stay safe. I will talk to you soon. Hopefully, I'll see you in person soon, too. Yeah, that would be nice.
Make it happen.
All right. Take care, Mike. Thank you. And I will be trying to do this regularly. So stay tuned. Give a thumbs up. Give a like to the YouTube. Follow Mike on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. See you later, guys.